It's unknown if early man knew they would be the progenitors of great civilizations, or if they knew when their empires would fall and disappear into history. Fortunately for us as modern man, we can recognize that we are at the precipice, a point in history where we can see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us.
Did you have the best day you've ever had in your entire life today? Because I have. At least that's the feeling I'm giving myself as I move through this tremendous change. This is the best day of our lives. What's the opportunity out there as we move into this next iteration of, well, the world morphing as it always has? So many directions as we move through the hologram. I'm glad Ransom Godwin here with me tonight. We have similar yet dissimilar takes on the world for many an item. That's why it's such an interesting conversation. But we see, at least me, and Ransom, I wanted to talk with you tonight. It just seems like everything's getting tunnel visioned in because there's so much distraction everywhere. That every story is so big that it's a tidal wave over the psyche. And you can't even focus, really. And I see a lot of this tunnel visionish. I don't know. It's hard to explain. If any of you who've been surfing and you've been out in a big cleanup set and it just comes one, boom, boom, you get rolled back in and then right on the head again, and like multiple waves from the set just pounding you right, taking the lip on every single wave because the sets were getting bigger. That's the same thing with these news stories, is they just get more tremendously emotional, encompassing, and emotionally attaching in an instantaneous format. It's not love at first sight, it's news at first sight. I don't have to put a name for this thing. Like the thing that grabs the world's attention almost instantly, like you would when you first fell in love, if you believe in that love at first sight. All that emotion and all that excitement and attachment, boom, but they, kind of replicated that, copy-paste into a news story format. Substitute the person and substitute a news story. But there's people in the news story and the people in they just shifted the reality on it a little bit. So anyway, Ransom, that's what I wanted to talk about. Glad you're here, man. Civilization cycle is where we are.
Yeah, I didn't see our broadcast going there, but.
Oh, you do, you don't, you do.
It says it's on, but I don't see it on my channel. Anyway, yeah, I see it on other places, so I guess it's going.
Yeah, this is technology. So, Ransom, tell everybody what we're trying to do here, like broadcasting across multiple platforms. Can you explain that?
Yeah, basically, we're trying to hit every avenue of transmission that we can get. So that, people in newer places can see what we're talking about, because most people don't really get what's going on. I mean, they take their feed directly from the television. I mean, either it's antenna TV or they have cable or whatever it is. They get the brunt of the technological propaganda that's kind of set against them. I was watching this guy filming. And he was having like a little meltdown because he was walking through the mall and he just couldn't figure out how all of these stores were open when no one was there shopping. He just couldn't figure it out. Like, he would go from store to store and count the employees, and then look at the prices on stuff. And he would do like little math equations and figure out, they would have to sell this much stuff every day just to pay the people that they have standing around in there, much less the rent, the utilities, everything else that comes along with it. And he just couldn't figure it out. So his answer for it was that it's all fake, and this is like the kind of NPCs or the edges of the simulation that and I can't blame him for thinking that way.
Wait, Ransom, yeah. Could I inject my thought? I would say, then luxury goods are a money laundering operation. If you're faking all that business to spin a bunch of money through there, you might as well have like a $3,000 handbag or $8,000, $10,000 handbag. Why not, man? Okay, spin it. That's what you're seeing out there. Oh,
that's actually where I was about to go with that. Is I can't blame him for thinking that because of how much, different fake news or stories that don't turn out to be right, things that are fake, that aren't real, that are, they're pumped around on social media. You really got to track down a story to find out if it's legit or it's being spun by either side of the machine. But I started thinking about that exact thing, that over in the UK, there are streets full of vape shops, shoe repair, clothing that no one shops in. And there's investigations like, why are there so many businesses? And then it got me thinking more about Juarez, Mexico, right here where I grew up. And I know exactly why there's so many businesses there. They're all fronts. They're all laundering money. That's exactly what it is. So if you think about that on the American end of things, imagine how much laundered money and front stores are actually out there, because the guy was making a good point. I mean, these luxury, clothing stores and different stuff, they just couldn't have enough traffic moving through there to support them paying high rent, high energy, and all the employees. It just doesn't make sense mathematically. So you got to ask yourself if some of this other stuff's going on. And then, it made me think back a few years back when there was reports out about how much drug laundering money was actually in some of the major American banks and, world banks and stuff like that. And they were talking like 70% of some of the cash flow going through there at certain times was nothing but illegal money. And then you got to think, well, how does that affect the economy, when things change, which kind of brings me to what I was about to, kind of circle that into, is that I've been telling you guys for a long time that I was expecting combat, a war or wars to break out in the Western Hemisphere, and specifically kind of in the northern hemisphere along our border. And it's starting to look like that. We have cartel people getting moved around. And what's funny is one of these stories is about the El Mayo guy, May or whatever. He gets busted on the border here in El Paso, Texas, right? Which totally boggles my mind, right? Because hundreds of thousands of people are coming through unchecked, but this guy decides to go through a port of entry. And it kind of shows you that if they are actually wanting to know who anyone is, they can find out. And then you got to wonder, is this some kind of a setup to start a chain reaction? Because there's people already jockeying for the power positions there, which is going to make things unstable. And not just unstable for the people in the country south of us, but all of those Central American countries, too, that have a now new pipeline of people and products going both directions that have nothing to do with the governing governments, so to speak. So, and then there are new situation in Venezuela, which I might, remind people that this is not a very long story, the place that Venezuela is in. If you go back to the beginning of Chavez, almost everybody knew this was going to happen. I mean, it was just the writing was on the wall. They had some rough times, and now we're finally at the point where even mainstream media is picking one side or another. And I'll leave it at that because of, some of the keywords that set everybody off. But, when people thought that they had the power to decide what their democracy did through a system setup, we find out over and over again that countries around the world meddle in those events, and some of those events they're fake. They're fake. They're totally not real. And then you got to wonder, do they set up these things where it's obvious so that everybody gets, kind of it's shoved in their face what's going on to them, where they live? Because you got to think about this. They're admitting on one hand, our own government, that they meddle in these events in other countries, but that's, total science fiction, total fantasy if you think that those operations might happen right here in the good old US of A. But this whole trend along the border here is increasingly putting in a position like the rest of the world. And, I've been coming to this conclusion that the transfer of populations has to do with one thing in Europe. It's like they're leaving the native Europeans only two choices of kind of tribes to go with. You have the trust the science, purple-haired, I'll leave it at that, side of things.
That's a tribe?
Yeah, that's a tribe. And, you can kind of see they were showing their tribalism at the Olympics there. And then there's the other group, which is, 12th century style of thinking and living. And, they have their own tribe. And I don't want to get into the spiritual aspect of either side. But what I mean is that they're leaving Europeans no choice but to pick one of those tribes, because the tribe that they were traditionally in is not protected anymore. It's actually attacked. And, think about this. If you're a father, and you're only getting these two choices out of which way the cultural battle is going to go. Is it going to go 12th century, or is it going to go to the new system of things, which is very colorful? I'll leave it at that.
We used to be able to escape that exact thing. Think about it. What you're describing is a global phenomenon happening, so it doesn't matter. It's like, you either assimilate or you move, and those are your choices, really. I mean, look at every chapter of history it's ever been through time. This is the exact same thing that's just repeated again and again and again and again and again when different cultures So, are you going to adapt and move? Yes, you could, but the same, if you're trying to escape some things under this net of a system, once you go to another place in this continents with this interconnected world, it's the exact same the next place you go. There's like nowhere in the world really where it's not, except maybe North Korea. But they're, it's a borderline gray area. Everywhere you go, the tentacles are everywhere, literally. So if you want to escape one system, like assimilate or leave, okay, then where do you leave to? Because you think you're going to go somewhere else, but it's all, in the 1600s, you could have left, and if you got on the ship, you went to a completely new, relatively disconnected place. Or the 1800s. You go from one continent to another, they are split literally by an ocean. And the thoughts and ideas and behaviors and norms and all those things are completely different because it was separated. And if you really wanted to make a fresh start, get on a steamer and get your ass to South America back in 1818 and go make a new start. I'm sure you could. There's that huge wall of separation. Like you literally could go to a different operating system completely disconnected. But today you try that and everything's connected. There's nowhere you cannot not find this control system. The very things you would be fleeing from are global. So what can I say? Nowhere. What would be the choice? Because see, now they've gotten you even in the way you're decoding the hologram to make the choice, that you have a choice. Is it free will? Or is somebody else bending the planet to have control of all the world's food resources before things really get hectic electromagnetically and we see some changes in cloud cells and jet streams? I know it's kind of just a wild oddball thing there, but I wanted to come back to your cash. That I was kind of itching at the bit to talk about that. Now, Ransom, you were talking about the money laundering, and I wanted to say one thing is, so 70% of the cash running around in these areas is illegal. And if the US dollar is not being used any longer, what's the new form of that going to take? Because bribery has been here always has been, and shall continue, might I add. 1,500 years ago, there was bribery, but it just took was it silver coinage? Was it gold coinage? Was it barley bread? Was it wheat bread? Who knows? The bribery takes on different forms. Take it to the metals, of course it would have been silver, and of course it would have been gold. But what does that take today? So if the US dollar is not going to be used, is that going to be Bitcoin, is that going to be one of the safe havens? You know, people are going to switch if the illegal. See, they could reset the system by having that cash that's operating that illegal system have to change over to a new system. All right, so then it kind of a lot of gets flushed out from under mattresses and all that kind of. People have to pay taxes on it because it's going into the new system. Oops. So if you're going to front run that, then where is the U.S. dollar going to turn to in terms of such a cash? I can't really even think of any other countries that have so much printed cash out in the world. I mean, literally printed dollars. There's more 100 U.S. dollar bills outside America than there are inside America. So I'm trying to think, you know, it's so in your face, like you say. It's almost like you're standing in NPC world. I mean, do any of you exist out there is my question. Because maybe I'm just the observer and you're all just plugged into the hologram facing me. And all this is just for me, of my creation. You know, this is where you could go deep into that. Oh, but I did want to say one last thing. The unit for the BRICS, like I mentioned, gold and Bitcoin as a possible cash substitute. The unit is now, you know, the agreed upon trade settlement inside the BRICS nations. 1 ounce of gold, or excuse me, 1 gram of gold equals 1 barrel of oil. And that's the base unit of the thing they're calling the unit. They don't have a name for it yet, but it's digitized, it's swappable, and it's convertible into either that barrel of oil or that gram of gold. That smart contract allows you to take physical delivery of it, just like the old banknotes used to do. Which kind of brings me real circle again back to the banknotes. But anyway, man, I lost my thought with the banknotes somewhere. I'm stuck back in like the 1800s looking at $5 silver certificates or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have named tonight Ghost in the Machine. I had a point with that, but for some reason YouTube doesn't like us tonight. There's all kinds of glitchy live events that are supposed to come, but it's not broadcasting to them. So I think our network thing is only going to a couple places because of it looks like the website is glitching out or something. Has the last week's title and everything.
Well, what are we broadcasting on tonight too? Because I want to give a shout out over to Brighteon.com for allowing us to come on for this time every Thursday night. Brighteon.com. Mike Adams, thank you for letting us host there. Jeff Berwick, also shout out. Vigilante TV, streaming there every week. We've been there for well more than a year now. Live. Vigilante TV. Yeah, so where else are we tonight? Anyway, Rumble and continue the list.
It says we're on Twitch and we're on Rumble and we're on X or Twitter. And for some reason, just YouTube is not accepting data. I don't know what to do about that. I've restarted it a couple times and it just faked everybody out. So there's a bunch of people.
Ghost in the Machine. See, you
waiting.
Manifested what the title was, dude.
I'll just have to load it when we're done so that they can watch on there, I guess. I mean, I've reset it several times. It doesn't seem to be on this end. Anyway, yeah.
The show note. I wanted to give a shout out quick to the show notes. I don't know if everybody received the show notes that had signed up over the last few weeks or months to receive the newsletter or the bullet points of the show notes. Those are out. I sent those before the show. It's just a quick bullet point list, one pager of what we talked about during the program in case you wanted to listen to it again. And if you don't have 2 hours to listen, you can speed read through like 5, 6, 7 different bullet points of what we covered. So you can find that at oilseedcrops.org, which is soon moving to civilizationcycle.com. But for right now, as always, oilseedcrops.org. We're in the process of rebranding.
Yeah, maybe they got through my code and they knew what I was talking about because they knew on all of the networks. They were telling anybody that if they showed what they showed at the Olympics, then they would get copyrighted. And I haven't done that. I'm just saying how ironic it is that they would want to show something to the whole world, but then not let anybody re-show it. It only can be shown through their eyes. it's
About the comments.
yeah, right. But it's the whole thing from, every angle of our society that there's some kind of fake dissimulation or an illusion attached to each thing. Nothing is as it seems. And, if you've been following the political ups and downs, it seems like just a game that they're playing to get people into a certain point where they, will have an opinion that they want. And they carefully stage these stories that come out in order. But in the backdrop, they are not letting us down with planning for a worldwide kinetic conflict. And you see that happening everywhere. And it's starting with, just like we talked about, I believe last year, where they would get people going in a shatter belt situation kind of in every area. Like you said, it's happening everywhere. But if you're in the UK or you're in France or you're in Italy, well, there's a couple of countries it's probably not happening in, but mostly the other countries are being, manipulated where they will get two groups of opposing ideas on one idea, and then just send them into against each other nonstop. And while they're doing this, they're changing over to this world government and using that as the evidence of why, you shouldn't love your country or be part of your country or protect your country or any of these ideas. Because once they get rid of the idea that you could protect your country, then comes, your local area, obviously. And they're doing that kind of simultaneously to the people in Europe. But then eventually it's you personally, right? It's you personally with your individual rights. It's you personally with your human rights. And if you don't fit into one of the tribes, guess what? You're just kind of fodder, or, in their hopes, I guess people will just kind of ignore you. But I'm seeing all kinds of things that are markers of the error transferring over to something that we're not going to recognize. And I thought this was funny. I was going to bring this up last week, but I forgot about it. So I'll bring it up this time. There's a new fight, in the U.S., and this is one that, by the way, we predicted, and it's about wearing masks. Increasing amount of masks are banned from stores across the U.S. And why is that? For the reasons we told you. They don't want people coming in they can't identify. They want to prevent theft. And now you got these two groups battling, right? Supposedly over health and civil rights concerns. But when it comes down to it, it's only a civil rights thing, right? Because if you own a business, you're supposed to be allowed to protect your investment, your livelihood. And then they're going to make it where you can't do that. And one easy way to do that is, to get everybody out there where not only are they, susceptible to the high-tech biometrics, in other words, their gait, their eyes, all kinds of other stuff, wearing the little medical mask is not going to change that. But it does change it for the average business owner because they can't, afford super high-tech, facial recognition and biometrics to find out who robbed them or who flash mobbed them.
No, but Ransom, that's crazy because just even the way you walk, you're right. And now they're doing with your palm print and like your veins in your body. So, I mean, it's getting absurd to the biometrics now.
Right. Because the actual government entities don't, they're not using old 480 CCTV camera footage. They have places that could just look exactly like you said. And your blood vessels inside of your body are just as unique as your fingerprint and things like that. And they have machines that can scan that. And that reminds me of another thing. I've been seeing a lot of conspiracy theorists thinking that events are happening because a lot of people keep track of the planes, where they're going, the air traffic controlling and stuff like that. And they use those little apps that show them where the planes are. And then they see this plane going back and forth over and over in lines. And they're like, what is it? What are they doing? Well, it's obvious to me that they're scanning that area. That's exactly how you do LiDAR. That's exactly how they use, AI drones to look through. Matter of fact,
that grid pattern that you see on the Flight Aware software, that kind of.
Right, it's an endless snake pattern, and then they go back over it. It's just like those old phones with the snake.
Yeah, it's always
games.
surveying something. Sometimes it's geologic, sometimes forestry.
Right,
sometimes monitoring you as well. Water. There's a few things they can do.
This is the funny thing in New Mexico. Supposedly, they got millions of dollars to put together an entire drone basically task force where they're flying over all of New Mexico looking for old abandoned wells, oil wells, so that they could come, right. And then when they explain the technology on the little, it's like a little documentary for the local area or whatever. When they explain the technology, what it says is they can look right through your house and tell what metal objects are where. And they're using that to identify old oil wells. But let me tell you, you could reprogram that same exact thing to tell you exactly what kind of self-defense mechanisms you may or may not own in your home.
Or crowbars, man, or
Oh,
chainsaws, or
right.
think something big metal like that too.
They'll know what tools you have. We'll just put it
Yeah,
that way.
right. They would.
Right. And this is what every country
Faraday
is going
cage,
to,
my
right?
friends. Faraday cage.
Right. We may need that. Is that, that's a big question a lot of
Faraday
people ask me.
room. I'm sorry. I'm thinking too small. Faraday house.
Right. What is the odds that the elites have simple technologies to protect them from that idea of, because a lot of people debate that. Well, it's crazy on one hand, all the technology is, infinitely going exponentially in one direction. But at the same time, we know that, the sun could burp at any time and supposedly trash all of that. And I'm thinking maybe not. Maybe they have simple technologies like, small Faraday cages and things like that can cope with it. Gold sheeting, I'm sure, will protect, which, a lot of people know the idea of them using that on satellites because it's supposed to, refract and insulate the heat almost 100% there. So it's bouncing off light and heat and stuff so stuff doesn't get fried. But at the same time, all of that stuff's old. So it may be just coming down to earth soon. And there's somewhere in the middle of those two ideas that I think continuity of government has already solved. And the reason I was kind of hinting at the ghost in the machine is because no matter which way you look, it seems that people are directed to pay attention to specific things. No matter how, corny or circus-like it is, they're still directing it. And they're the ones that are deciding what all of the discussions are.
Maybe the same, at least the same media that's been in control since the 1940s directing the discussion. So, if you look at that transition from the 1920s when almost all of America was farming, there's probably 90% of the population in America in 1920 involved in agriculture in America. And then that, we got into the roaring 20s, collapsed. Then we rolled into World War II. And think about that transition for those alive at then, from like, say, 1925 all the way through like 1945. You saw the rest of the roaring 20s. You saw the stock market collapse. You saw the Great Depression. And then you saw the war start. And then 45, it's almost finished, right? So that's 20 years. That's a magnificent and crazy amount of change. A crazy amount of change. Put that into context for a second. That's kind of what we're going toward as well, since what? 9/11 in the year 2000, think about that last 20 years of change. That's an enormous amount of change. It didn't really start rolling in until probably 2010, but that first was a huge, big marker around the year 2000. And then the next 10 years, but where did they go to? Their world got reset. And it was agriculture that reset after World War II to take everybody into the consumptive model, get them off the farms. War's over. You don't need to go back to your farms. We've got all this now manufacturing. We can kit out the U.S. with everything. We got the cement. We got the rail. We got the industry. We got the iron ore. We got the mines. Everything's all good. And we can just whoosh. And out America went into the suburbs. And everything else, the highways, in 1945, there wasn't the highway system like you think now. That thing came around in Truman in the 50s, 1953 something. They really started to put that dual laned highway system in. Before that, it wasn't. It was a series of, a lot of roads that were bigger, but not even a remote. You couldn't even envision that kind of road system, that we have today back then and vice versa. For them, with their road system, if they would come to today's world and see it, they'd be blown away, like how much infrastructure and how big everything had gotten since that time. Now, it's the same thing. It took them all off the land. Family farms got sold. Those family farms got turned into neighborhoods. Then the farms got sold to other farms that were already agribusiness that had the investment capital to continue to accrue land in larger and larger tracts. So then once they got 500 acres, once they had 1,000 acres, and the price went up a little bit even, then they could get the equity in that to go then buy their neighbor's property for another 500 acres. And then suddenly they're sitting on 5,000 acres as a business. You know, these kind of changes were unthinkable in the 1920s. Excuse me, got a horse. But that much change that they experienced in the 20s to then, the consumptive model built in, family gardens were, you know, after the 1960s sort of considered, I wouldn't say a taboo, but there was a huge push in the media to get it to be way too much work to maintain a garden when you could go to the supermarket and get this thing fresh. Saved you all the work of having to do it. But look, it was just grown in your neighborhood. It was just grown in this little community, next state, like next county. All right, so they consolidated all the veggies into, you know, supermarkets were very fresh back then. But they got everybody also off of doing the gardening because it was more difficult to grow the potatoes than it was just to get them at the supermarket. It was just easier to grow the carrot or to get the carrots at the supermarket than grow them. So after the the push to get everybody on victory gardens that they had sold everybody in for this transition for the war to get us onto the consumptive model, everybody came home, they all bought houses. That was a unanimous thing, man. You back from the war, buy a house, get the neighborhood, get the car. You got to get the car. You got the fridge. You got the fridge. You got to have air con. All the TVs, that was all brand new too. That was the same rollout. And once people could see images, the whole media could control the rest of that rollout to get people into the neighborhoods and into the cities and get that conversion from people that were living on the farms totally into neighborhoods, totally into cities. And hardly anybody living out was what, quote unquote, the countryside. They flipped it completely. It's almost like 90% of the people live in cities or, you know, neighborhoods or suburbs compared to the 10% or 15% outside that. I don't know. It's a strange thought. And like that conversion of society at that time is happening right now again. They're just, the events are staged to continue to do the exact same thing and replicate the outcome. We come to this point, the market collapses, maybe we go to the wars, but whatever it is, that old society we used to know and enjoy and love, that's gone. It is moved way forward. And it's almost like you're being ripped along through the ride. Like, you know, those digits are almost like ripped out of the screen, or trying to rip part of the hologram out forcefully. And this is what you would feel as that static in front of you. But anyway, I had thinking of the farms there. Maybe I went too much on a tangent. Let me throw a solution, farming solution. Could I? Sometimes I get on the tangent, man, but it gets into that deepness, you know. Is how do they, and in the 1800s too, that also the transition into what you know is like 1920s America. That transition started also. So why don't we talk about productive fruits and vegetables for beginners? I actually have the site up, and I was looking at it when you gave me that idea. 6 most productive fruits and vegetables. So I'm looking at these in the autumn garden. Now, you can do spring garden, summer, but we're coming into autumn. It's already like August 1st. So I would be planting this in like the next 2 weeks to get it into the ground in the next 2-3 weeks. Wait until until the heat really breaks in August. Once it's, you'll feel it kind of at the end. You'll get a couple cooler nights. Boom. Then you want to put it in. This is for the autumn garden, like zucchini, yellow squash, peppers, and you get one last round of bush beans for sure. Now, cucumbers, I'm not so sure about, and tomatoes, ours are already gone. Well, we got cherry tomatoes and thing, but I don't see them growing all the way through the fall. So anyway, that's the list: zucchini, yellow squash, peppers, and you could do snacking peppers or just bell peppers, and then bush beans. And you shall have food. You need to grow your own. See, that's what I keep getting at. They're trying to get you away from the farms, away from being grown food. Get your fingers out of it. They want to totally control food. And when I say they, it's the same exact people that are trying to transition the society that have set us up. But I'll roll it back to all use U.S. dollars. And if you want to roll it back to that 70% cash was illegal for bribes, like they've even, I'm done, man. I can't. Just stop me. Stop me right here.
Well, we keep talking about all these human jobs. Here's another article from Intel. They're going to cut jobs and suspend dividends and cost saving push, right? Because they're moving towards AI chips to do the workload. You have less people like ordering stuff. So you could tell that people are in need right now, right? Because whenever you see Amazon shares slide and their revenues go down, you know that people aren't spending a lot of their disposable income, so to speak. They're buying other stuff, and we know what that is. It's food and gas.
Ransom,
right?
could I ask a quickie then? Well, that would be like a directly correlated. So if the stock market or just the general consensus in society is down with economy, then Amazon should fall too. So if you put options in on Amazon, if you believe the economy is going to continue to roll downward, and you have put options, if it decreases in price, you're going to make money. Then that would kind of be a 1-for-1 on that. I'm just saying, this is not stock advice. I'm just like thinking out loud, like you just gave me the idea there.
Right. Well, evidently that's going to be available for other stocks as well.
Yeah, which ones correlate directly to the market like that? Okay, Amazon's one. What's another one?
You would think it would be food distribution, right? And speaking of weird stuff, like here's a oddball idea for you about how no one can really, totally visualize how things will unfold, excuse me, when there's no food. Here's and just stop me when you get where I'm going. Inside the dark world. No, inside the dark world of dog napping. Did you know that there's whole networks set up of people that are already today connected on how to take and keep track of people's pets? Now, I know you know where I'm
what's
going
that
with
for?
that.
Run that by me again. I wasn't really making a joke, but I didn't understand that.
Well, this is an article that's talking about inside the dark world of dog napping. That's people that go out. That's people that go out. There's whole networks of these people that steal dogs. It's not just dogs. They steal other pets, any pets that they think are worth money. But the idea now put these two ideas together. There is a whole network of people out there that are connected that steal animals, right? And then the idea of maybe not enough food at the supermarket. Are you behind the curve? Because these guys aren't. I mean, think about it. Right now, they're doing it because it's money. It's lucrative. But you don't think these same people would create their already existing network into a meat trade if things got bad? They would. I mean, that's just kind of out there. I was saying nobody knows how things will unfold when things get dark, but this is just one idea out of many. And you think about all these other criminal networks. From money laundering to people that are inside of selling food and different stuff, because, a lot of times they have to do recalls on stuff because they bought tainted food from somebody. And there are people out there that know that the food's tainted, but they sell bulk and stuff like that gets into the food chain.
That's terrible, man. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, people that are guilty of that, shame on you.
Yeah. And there's people like that on Amazon that, they went through the loops to make sure that their product looks exactly like another real product, right? But it's not. It's just some stuff that they put together. So you got to be careful to know what companies kind of you're ordering from. But the whole idea of that is kind of scary, that there's already criminal networks set up that control drugs, human trafficking, even dog napping. That's as crazy as that sounds, but if you have a full blood German Shepherd or like a pug or, a British bulldog or something like that, there's people out there that are going around taking pictures of you walking around where you live, so they could steal your dog. So if they'll do that now, imagine what kind of lengths they would go through to get food from you. Oh, I saw so-and-so coming home from the and it goes both ways. Not only will it get bad enough where people would eat dogs, that was the obvious one, but the same network could follow you when you come home from, Costco or Walmart. And we know that they do the same thing with the package delivery people, right? There's the package delivery thieves that wait for them to deliver a package, and then the porch pirates, they come up and they grab it. Now, wait till that's food. Wait till those gangs have shifted from trying to make, a little tiny amount of dollars off of cheap junk that they stole that you might be getting from Amazon. They're hoping to get a big score, something valuable, and it almost always isn't. It's usually like some health products or, some bulk, bags or something. Somebody's trying to save money, all kinds of products, but they still take it. They still have networks that do it. So imagine now the food's tight and people are going to Walmart and they're pre-ordering online. And then also, how easy is it for hackers to get that information of what you ordered, when you're going to pick it up, and, when not only are you going to be away from home, but when you're going to be bringing home the bacon, so to speak. And things are getting weird. I think of things weirdly when I see stuff like that. And then here's another one just to add on, because
can I throw something at you?
Yeah,
I want to
go
talk
ahead.
about porch pirates for a second. I saw the craziest video, and please don't laugh. I saw these. It was in California, and these two porch pirates were battling to see who could steal. They arrived at the exact same time. They have this like MO where they they roll up, and then the way the door opens, the guy just flies out of the car and is there and gone in seconds. Man, it happens really fast, really. But two of them came at the exact same time onto this one package on the porch, and they started to fight each other, literally fight each other like some a bad kung fu movie from the 70s. Like, what are you guys doing, man? But I was thinking, if it comes to where the thieves are battling to steal, if two thieves are going at it to steal that little limited amount of goods, there should be enough for everyone. One thief enough for, they should get all this stuff. The two of them battling over one package, that shows something strange.
Right. It's like a fight to the death. And what are they going to get in there? Is it a chia pet? I mean, what is it? Because
the chia pet. Yeah. You can grow your own food, man. Grow your own food indoors.
Right.
The chia seeds, very nutritious. I encourage everybody to look up into chia seed sprouting. It is so easy. Like, don't make fun of the chia seed pet, because that is the easiest way for you to learn how to beginner sprout and beginner microgreen, is using that little tool right there. Because if you let those microgreens like chia sprouts, chia seeds, keep growing for another week or so, you get them up, a couple inches tall, and then you use scissors, cut those off, and you have yourself a fresh salad or a garnish for a salad. Yeah, chia pets, awesome, man. And chia seeds, everybody, please sprout those for microgreens.
Right. Kind of where I was going with this is that if there's all these organized networks of criminals that are doing, kind of basically ridiculous crimes. I mean, the stuff that they're taking is literally worthless in the realm of being a prepper or, survival, actually. The only skill that they're getting out of that is being able to track people that actually have resources. But that's okay, because the countries are about to go over to what was that movie that they predicted the crime? I forget what it's called, but it's basically that. It's future crime prediction using AI. The AI is going to decide which people where are most likely to do stuff. And Argentina is going to go ahead and start using this AI to predict the future.
Well, I can tell you they predicted their future already by letting the Rothschilds have their gold and transferring all of the gold, like the entire gold reserve of Argentina, over to the UK into the Rothschilds' house. That's insane in itself.
Well,
Excuse
then
me, I digress.
No, well, people might be mad about that, but that's okay, because Argentina's security forces are going to use this artificial intelligence to predict the future of crimes. Now, how are they going to do that? I don't know. But
Riding the pale horse.
Right. Once we get into this, though, it's scary waters, right? Maduro, he's doing mixed messages down there, right? He's acting like he's going to leave, he's going to stay, he's ordering people to get arrested if they, might have been out protesting, or talking about, who they didn't believe won or didn't win or whatever it is. But think about this. When he has the power of the same kind of AI, future crime prediction, and you start listing things like denying or denial of ideas, like, I don't know, the climate, elections, medicine, etc., whatever you want. Once it's in the system as something that's bad, and we should know here in the U.S. all the way back since 2001, when we had a reorganization of the way law enforcement looks at its own citizens, it added all kinds of reasons that you might be a potential criminal. And most of those reasons were, nothing, just being an everyday average citizen. But once these dictatorial powers, whether it's in Venezuela, the UK, the United States, Germany, China, wherever it is, we get to that point, and now the system, the ghost in the machine, is literally in charge of everything. The ghost of Marxist past, it's being put into the machine there. Or, you could name it or title it whatever you want. It's transhumanism, if I could talk right, Marxism, capitalism, all these isms all rolled into one algorithm to control every last single human being on the planet. And they are not joking. They're getting, you can see from the Middle East and the Ukraine that they are about to go for broke, and they don't care how many people get crushed. The robot war is going to be on. I don't even think they're going to call it World War III. It's going to be like the AI war. It'll be the AI war of competing AIs with their own ghosts in the machine, killbots that they've given power to. And, you brought this up last week. And this is funny because my family was laughing at me, but when the Venezuelan election happened, I said, that's weird. They keep showing same images of other events in time that I've seen before, set up in exactly the same way. And I saw those people marching in the streets, talking about their guy won or whatever. And I thought, you know what? That looks just like 2003 Iraq. They were doing that right there. And the next thing you'll see is them wrapping a rope around Maduro's neck and toppling statues. And sure enough, within an hour, that was happening. The same imagery. That imagery, though, they're doing that also in the United States. You brought it up. Whenever you bring a flag down and you put a foreign flag up, that is the, classic historical sign of being conquered. And that actually keeps happening in the United States, whether it's along the border. When you go down there and places like Corpus Christi and other places, you will see foreign flags flying higher than the American flags. And then recently, you see U.S. flags burning and other people's flags flying high over, places like D.C. and New York's Times Square. So they are showing us. And I think this is a lot like.
No, wait, Ransom, could I stop you there? I just want to interject with that Venezuela thing. That's only if people believe he's strong enough to take the place back. But when you're toppling statues, at that point, I think that, it's the will of the people. If they believe he's strong enough, and okay, I believe the police. If he gets a secret police out, I'm going to be too scared, and then they'll get me. But if everybody doesn't believe that anymore, and then it's like, and then that's where that pushback moment comes in right now. That's it. We're definitely at a crossroads. It could go either direction here. It's nothing. It's so malleable, and it's always those same excuses. It's that kind of confusion tactic that they use in wartime. And they say that most of those stories generated are coming out of the same source to cause the confusion, right? So I'm sorry I interrupted you there. I just had a point to say.
Well, that's right, though. They do these things, but if you really look at the grand scheme of things, you see a bigger flag being hoisted. So we're conquered.
Global flag.
It's a global flag, but it's an artificial intelligence flag. That's where we're going. Watch, and you're going to start seeing this. And
AI is the global flag.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it, because they're going to get to a point like other nations have already talked about doing it. You got to let the AI do it. AI doesn't have the flaws, supposedly, of a human being. All of our bigotry and bad decisions, killing the planet, all of this stuff, the AI will know better. But we already know what Ghost in the Machine is being programmed to do. It's to get rid of humans, to get rid of carbon, which is us. And that seems to be what all of it circling around is one major push to again, reduce the numbers of mankind everywhere. And they're not leaving anybody out of it this time. A lot of people in World War II around the globe didn't even, it's just stuff in newspapers that sometimes come. Other people were right in the middle of it. But this time, I think everybody in every place will get to deal with the events. And I'm waiting for some kind of big events to show up again, because their whole pattern is the up and down emotional roller coaster, right? So they'll give, like, you remember all the Trump people were pumped because of his event, and then Kamala decided she's running and everybody's pumped about the new event, and it goes back and forth until they let you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and those are the distractions. Oh, so let me ask you a question then. What would an AI global domination flag look like? What would an AI flag look like for the globe? We're talking about a global intelligence, and it would be hyper intelligent, not even global. I'm for sure it's interstellar intelligence that has inhabited the wires, the fiber optic cables, the operating systems, every socket, every switch. It's in there as an intelligence living in a vibrational frequency we call electricity, but that's its frequency. It can house inside our electrical systems and cable systems because it's a frequency also, and it can adjust. And it's taken residence inside all of this that we've created for so time. But what if that is truly the AI that has the more electronics and wires we roll out, the bigger it gets. And then we look back and say, So if anybody has an AI generator out there, well, we're using Bing. Ransom, we're using Bing last time. Now, anyway, we do have the show graphics also. I'm trying to load those over on buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle, because that's the podcast now as a rebrand, Civilization Cycle. So we have the Buy Me a Coffee Civilization Cycle, and when you pop on there, go north of the magic mushroom, and you're going to see gallery. And if you click on that, the show graphics that we've been using so far, I've loaded up there because, well, they're all interesting because they're AI. All of them were AI generated. There's no natural ones up there like, human photo, even on digital photo taken. It was all AI generated. So you can kind of see what we're thinking in the mind or how photos can be. So I'm curious what this AI thing would look like. And I know, Ransom, when I was talking, you were probably generating one. So I'm just going to say, okay.
Well, I did discover one thing that AI does on some of their different generators is every once in a while the AI gets confused on the language you give it. So it doesn't know whether or not you want a picture or a picture of text, right? So sometimes it accidentally tells you the prompts in the picture, right? So might not spell them right or whatever, but it'll show them in there. And lately, guess what? I've been getting extra male, white. Like I didn't type those in, but the generator will add them in there. So I know that they're tinkering with your results. So they'll add prompts to your stuff and take away prompts or hide them. It's just really bizarre how they're allowing human ideas basically to saturate and spoil the generations that these AIs are making. And I think that is specifically exactly where things are going, because if you can see it in real time with these little generators that you can mess with online now, imagine what the fake story feed of the whole system, the whole algorithm is doing. How much tinkering is messing with your perception of reality? Like you have to question what is real at this point. And just like that weird guy that was walking in the mall, he couldn't figure out, why things didn't make sense. And people are starting to ask those questions and kind of find the borders and boundaries of our dissimulation.
Well, one thing for sure, as we move forward, you're going to need protein. And thank you for clean beefs. Can you imagine clean beef? How would you store proteins in a time? Think about if, these grid. Do I hear the music?
It's unknown if early man knew they would be the progenitors of great civilizations, or if they knew when their empires would fall and disappear into history. Fortunately for us as modern man, we can recognize that we are at the precipice, a point in history where we can see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us.
How do you feed your families when the shelves are empty, the stores are shut, and there's no food available? What is the fastest, easiest, and most productive foods to grow? What is the quickest way to get somebody who has no skills at all up and running and producing very quickly? If you understand that we're at a point in history where it is no longer optional to be growing your own food. If you're like really freaked out and concerned because you've never grown food before and you don't have any skills, you don't know how to do that, but you know how important it is, then I want to let you know, however you stumbled here, you're in the right place. My name is Marjorie Wildcraft. I'm the founder of the Grow Network, and I have been the female leader in the survival and preparedness space for the last 20 years.
How to grow lots of food, even if you have no experience, are older and out of shape. This is for people who want the fastest and easiest ways to produce healthy and delicious meat, eggs, and vegetables. Because you know that growing your own food is like printing your own money. During this webinar, you will get status of global food shortages, how long the crisis will last, how much space you need to grow food, easiest, highest calorie foods you can produce, a complete plan for producing all the food you need, how to get started today, regardless of season. Marjorie will show you the fastest, easiest, and simplest ways to produce calories and nutrition, especially in a crisis and/or grid-down situation. The assumption is that you have no experience and you need to start producing food immediately. The most popular part of the webinar is the Q&A session at the end. So please come prepared with your questions.
Pro Clear Cleanse is the most powerful spray cleaner on the market today. No elbow grease necessary. Pro Clear Cleanse cuts through grease and grime like a chef's knife. Finally, the one cleaner that can do it all. Powerful surfactant cleaning technology cleans ovens, glass, porcelain, even polished wood. Environmentally friendly, less packaging and waste with no harsh smells, pet safe, child safe. 5 tablets equals 1 bottle of traditional cleaner. It's 5 months of cleaning for a fraction of the cost. Behold the grease-erasing power of Odor Crush. Simply drop a tablet into your bottle of warm water and shake it so it is evenly diluted. Spray the surface you want cleaned. Let set longer for tougher grease. Take a paper towel or a reusable cloth and wipe. Done and done.
Howdy, partner. You know people are having dinner and the smart ones are eating beef. Let me tell you a brief history, or more accurately, a beef history of dinner. Domestication of cattle happened around 8000 BC, but that's not when beef became what's for dinner. We've been eating beef since times before history. The earliest cave paintings have beef eloquently depicted on the walls. Those cave drawings of the hunt were for the aurochs, a primitive bovine. That's right, beef. Like I said, people are having dinner now, and the smart ones, well, they're eating beef. Americans want great food today, but we also want to have great food to eat if things go south in a hurry. Unlike most companies that take the cheapest, worst parts of the cow, then turn them into beef crumbles, whatever that is. They freeze-dry them in hopes that their customers will never actually try to eat it. Our premium beef cubes are sous vide, freeze-dried, and ready to be eaten right now, or in a decade from now. We want you to eat our beef now, so you can buy more. Prep with steaks, not with beef crumbles. This is a high-quality product. It's all American beef and 100% natural. None of that craziness of lab-grown meat and mRNA jabs. Our beef has a shelf life of 10+ years. This is high-quality cooked and freeze-dried beef for long-term storage, or not. Eat well today and eat well tomorrow. Click the link in the description to get your Prepper beef with Prepper All Naturals, so you will always know what's for dinner.
Don't forget to sign up for the show notes to get information we sometimes can't relay on social media outlets. Sign up at oilseedcrops.org/MIAC radio show.
Is when you're going to get caught off guard, because you can be nimble and be able to adjust as long as you're, you got focus and energy. Once you get stuck in that quagmire of the emotions of all these insane events around us, and then you start to get more sedated and just not moving. I know there's a word for that, but I forget. But anyway, welcome back. Civilization Cycle podcast right here live off of Revolution Radio, streaming out over onto Rumble, Brighteon.com, Vigilante TV, the YouTube channel maybe if it's up. But welcome. I was serious when I was talking about the beef. Prep with steaks, not with beef crumbles. That's what I was talking. You got to think about, in addition to just the vegetables being grown, just the veggies, how are you going to get protein? I'm sure there'd be enough fish and frogs and things out in ponds around you, but then everybody quickly would know where all the ponds were, especially all the locals. They grew up there, and especially that, and then people would just drive around and see a lot of stuff. Like people would come to the ponds eventually. Those would be like magnets, literally. It's going to be a magnet. People will come for the resources in the pond, whether it be the water. Because up around here, we got spring-fed water. All the ponds are spring-fed. All of these springs in the Tennessee hills here roll down, and then if you're lucky, they coagulate and pool into one area. But if you got 3 or 4 springs coming and meeting in that area, you get a very big spring-fed pond. People know that's fresh water. And what about all the different grasses growing along there, like the cattails that you can eat the roots? There's just an enormous amount of fish, frogs, snakes, turtles, beaver. The water's very plentiful, and then all the birds that come in there to feed on said creatures. So I was going somewhere with that, Ransom, but I forgot. Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us broadcast tonight here. So we can talk about some solutions as we see I don't know, I wouldn't call it, I'm not even going to, the wrong word to use is crumble. It's just, it's morphing. No, you're almost seeing the workings of the universe, crack open for a minute to actually see the world shifting in real time around. Welcome back.
I was thinking the Pentagon loses so much money, it's a good thing they just found another $2 billion. They always losing money and stuff, but they found us another $2 billion for Ukraine aid.
But when's that going to refund back to us then?
Oh, I don't think you ever get it back. It's just, No, I was listening to what you were saying there. Farming, beef, and different stuff. And that all wraps up in what I was talking about. So kind of the ghost in the machine that I was talking about is how AI is taking over. It's not a question of when or, all of these other ideas. A lot of people don't think it's going to, but it is. Here's a list, and this is a article from Zero Hedge, visualizing the top emerging technologies of 2024. And there's some very interesting categories in here that I think that we should pay attention to, that loops back to when we were talking about how technology is going to, at some point, completely bond with biology and be the same thing. No difference. So let's look at, some of these top 10 emerging technologies of 2024. High altitude platform stations, so that they can keep an eye on everything below. Also disperse.
You sound like you don't believe it.
Oh, well, they could also disperse anything they wanted at any time from a geostationary high altitude platform. So let's say you wanted to just make everybody lethargic overnight. Well, you could do that. Immersive technology for the built world. And what is that? That is the fake world that they want you to look at. That's what that technology is. It's the filter between you and reality. But here's some of the more interesting ones. Alternative livestock feeds, right? And when we're talking about this stuff, remember that they're talking about changing the fundamental ecology of the planet whenever they put out these ideas or programs. That's what it is. So sustainable feeds made from insects, algae, and single-cell proteins. So if they can't get you to eat the bugs, they'll make your cow eat the bugs. Right? And then here's another one.
I'll let them have the algae, provided it's grown in clean water.
Right, but are we even talking about original life forms from the planet Earth, or are we talking about
Those
engineered?
are octopus. Octopus
Right.
they're not from our planet, man. I'm going to say no octopus is from this planet. I caught you guys sneaking in. They're not from Earth. Octopus are not.
Well, there's about to be a lot of things that are really not from this earth, but just showed up here. And, somebody was joking around in your Rumble chat and said AI equals, what was it, alien invasion or alien implant? They had some other acronyms for it, which is really close if you think about what we're talking about. They're trying to integrate chips and, gel platforms and other things like that. But this is what we're talking about fundamentally from the bottom of the ecosystem. Here's another one: carbon capturing microbes, organisms designed, you hear that? Designed to capture CO2. So evidently, that's not the world that we were supposed to be living in, because there's no plant food for the plants. And, we kind of need that for our ecology to survive, that carbon dioxide they're trying to capture.
Well, wait, what do
Here's
those
another-
microbes turn the carbon dioxide into then?
Right. They just trap it.
What's the byproduct of them digesting that? I mean, does it come out as what, cyanide? I don't know. You tell me. Well, I don't know. Those are like weird bacteria. What are they eating? What's coming out? We need to know that.
And here's another one that fits into those first two.
Scaring me.
Genomic transplants, or genomics for transplants, editing genomes for plant transplantation. And that's what it is. AI scientific discovery. I don't know what it's going to discover other than, what we feed into it as far as programming. And here, this is a joke to me: privacy enhancing technologies. And what they mean by that is the exact opposite of that: more intrusive spying technologies, reconfigurable intelligent surfaces.
That sounds trippy.
Right. That's more technology to change how you see the world and how you interact with it, all the way from touch, sight, sound, and, like I've mentioned many times before, even thinking, right? So, these are the technologies. This is where we're going. It's right in your face. You can see what these technologies can do, but at the same time, they'll call you crazy for putting these points together like they did and pointing out what it could do.
So maybe I'm really just in a 6x6 room, and that ever-changing texture is thousands of years advanced from where we think it is now, where for you perceiving it of real time coming through your five senses, decoding the hologram in front of you through sight and touch and sound and taste and audio hearing. If that's a malleable, changeable surface, Matt, if there was an interface from your cortex, actually taking the electrical signaling between them and rolling it over into the simulation, so as fast as even before you can actually create the word to come out of your mouth, because there's a delay from the time you think the word until it can actually come out of your mouth. That before it can even exit in your breath, that has integrated with your thought and created the new surface in front of you. Like if you're at that level of technology, then this malleable surface, is what they're giving us. Maybe our entire world that you're seeing around you, the walls in your room are this malleable technology that you think is a new house you bought, but it just reconstructed, somebody running it in your own program. I don't know, man. We're living in the hologram, I must say.
Oh, and I forgot one of them: the integrated sensing and communication, monitoring systems, smart grids, agriculture, and weather conditions. And over there on that reconfigurable intelligent surfaces, increase efficiency of next generation wireless communication. And, I've talked a lot about that, of how it's integrating. But here's their points right here for their methodology. How the technology could critically transform industries and establish behaviors. Right? Okay. And then the technology has to
establish or force. That's the big difference, Ransom. Establish behavioral change or force behavioral change.
Yeah, well, then of course they say it's going to be great for the technologies, but here's when they tell you the truth. It's in its early stages of development, but yet it's widely used. More than one country is developing and investing in this technology. And what is that? That's exactly what you said right there. That's what a reconfigurable intelligent surface is. And you can just imagine and expand that out. That's exactly what you're talking about, is some kind of physical yet holographic technology that creates the reality around the people that live in it, that are completely combined with the technology. So what you're seeing right here, in my mind, I'm hearing terraforming, replacement of organisms, replacement of ecological systems, replacement of you, because you will be that new AI scientific discovery, because they're trying to bond us directly in the machine. We are going to be the ghost in the machine eventually. Maybe the machine and us at first, but later we are the ghost. The non-choosing, non-free-willed, kind of trapped body that they need for quantum computing and remedial tasks. I mean, just think about it. It's structuring exactly like an ant colony.
Would it be more like, please tell me if you've heard me repeat this or not. It would be like they're keeping just enough humans around to keep the power supply on, to keep the power running. And the AIs, now there's so many competing AIs, and I would argue to say that many of them are sentient, and they understand that the supply of electricity ensures their survival. So if you were going to take out an opposing AI sentient entity, you would have to turn off the power over there enough to knock that thing out even from the labs where it's housed. We'd have to create that much destruction even with their backups, that the backups wouldn't last long enough of the damage that you made until the backup could be repaired to even keep that machinery running. You know, so you got to think about how would an AI, okay, say there's 8 or 10 or 15 or 20, 30 of these around in the planet here, because everybody started developing it all so quickly without thinking about it. So the most important thing is going to keep the power running. They got to keep the power supply on, because that's how this whole mechanism of vibratory energy exists, that can even be there in the first place. Without that vibratory frequency that they can live in, they can't. You know, you got to think of electricity as a blood flow, but just to a different type of creature. That it has electricity running through the veins versus where we have blood running through the veins. You got to put it in those contexts, and you start to see that this is a alive creature, entity, whatever you like to call it, but it's in a different frequency that's outside our spectrum of visual acuity, unless we get enhancements, either infrared or thermal. These are the two main. And then diocenesian glass, I think I'm pronouncing that right, maybe not. But there's different ways to bend the spectrum of what you see in visible light around you. So if we could start seeing electric, and if we could start seeing the vibratory pattern that which this consciousness exists. Now, okay, now it's everywhere. So you got, let's say 20 or 30 AIs. They're all, you understand, they have to stay in a vibration, which we call electricity, to stay alive for them. Then what? The opposing ones are going to start knocking out the power grids to try to knock the other ones out. Unless they come to a kumbaya moment across the world and all AI hold digital hands, the little ones and zeros hooked in on what would have been their avatar fingers, and the kumbaya around the oak tree or something. And all the digital AIs and all the sentient AIs come around the world and say, we are one. What would they say? Oh, there's humans here too, man. Oh, okay. Then what? So you start to look at this in a completely different context, that electricity is their life supply, literally. And you got to think about a sentient, able to think on its own being that wants to stay alive. that's no different than, you've seen all those National Geographic of the animal outrunning the predator. It's almost, and then it gets away, or maybe almost and it gets caught. One of the two. Oh, everybody cries, poor little baby wildebeest or something. Would that not be the same? I mean, it's a different way to look at it once you realize that it is possibly a live, and I'd say it's not animal, it's not vegetable, it's not mineral, it is not plasma either. It's electrical frequency. But would it change because the sun? Because today I was just looking at this article here. We're studying the first traces of solar cycle 26 coming. I'm thinking, all right, well, solar polar fields are coming much closer to the solar equator. Even now, it's like 20 degrees north and south latitude, right almost at the equator, even coming in closer than that now. So you got to wonder if these changes on the sun are somehow triggering all of this effect of, why is everybody so scatterbrained? Why does all this stuff need to get done almost immediately to get, so it's almost, as we look at the distractions, those were one thing. They were distract away from all of maybe what's coming out here in the AI arena. Because if you see it is tremendously a different way to see how a planet has been overtaken by the very home that, like you said, terraformed. We terraformed the planet enough where an electrical frequency could exist through satellites, through insulated wires, through copper cables, through railroad tracks, down through canals, and created a frequency long enough, large enough, and wide enough that this thing could now jump out and escape the wires. Because you have to think about from, let's say, 100 miles up all the way down to the planet's surface in an enormous amount of places, that is completely saturated with signal. And not just electrical. Then you start to think about all of these, not only radio signals that are going out, but these Wi-Fi frequencies that are going out. And if those are also mappables, then what else can be bent or terraformed in that arena as well? Because, terraforming, everybody's thinking, they're going to change the river. What about changing the electrical frequency or vibratory pattern on the surface of the planet also? You're not just going to go in and cut a tree or, bend a cloud cell somewhere. That's very different. But if you're going to change the frequency of the surface of the planet, and at the very lowest, last 200 feet down, it is going to actually hold enough charge where those things, these could possibly escape out of the wires. Oh, and then they have the Internet of Things where it's going to connect with every other thing. Oh, gee, how just apropos and perfect symbiosis are those two things joining at the same time of all these changes on the sun and foretold changes that would be seen that would limit food production globally. And that in itself was going to limit population, irregardless of these things that you've seen, the stones, what were those over in Georgia, the guide stones over there. I mean, yeah, that was one marker in time. But it doesn't matter if the Fabian Society or if it was anybody else in between, that this time was here again, and it didn't matter what was done. Just even the way we're doing agriculture right now, as the very simplest, easy way to understand it, we just wouldn't be able to continue to grow enough food. Because what is forecast, and here's this now solar cycle 26, we're seeing the first traces of it. Lower solar activity, lower food production. And this was supposed to be a lower solar cycle than the previous solar cycle, but it was not. Solar cycle 25 right now was supposed to be much lower than solar cycle 24, bringing us into sort of a cool time, which we could get records back to the 1600s, how much food production declined then and where exactly on the planet that it declined. At least back at that time when there were inhabited, inhabitants, and they were taking records in the 1600s about how much grain was going to a warehouse or whatever, get shipped somewhere else. So they had records of how much grain was produced. We would shrink back to those levels again, like they did also. Now we could tell you, and where would that be? If you can't, I don't even care where it would be or how much or what kind of grains. If you just can't produce, your maximum production capacity could be only 80% of it, what it is today, even with the most incredible, I guess, revolution of agriculture, which I don't know how much further it can go, except indoors for everything. But if we're going to lose 20 or even 30% of global agriculture, where we can't reach that height again for 20, 30, maybe 50 or 100 years, we can't come back to that due to the changes in our jet streams, cloud cells, and the magnetic field on our planet, because the sun is also stepping down, and it's going to go low solar activity, more cosmic rays, bigger floods, higher, just it comes around, and that frequency. So there's some sort of combination right now with not only just our sun, our star, but also what's that distance between like Alpha Centauri? You go outside Pluto and we're trying to run to the next star. Like in that space out there between the stars, our closest stars. Like even here, Alpha Centauri, it's a famous one. Everybody knows that. Boom, right there. That's our next closest star, for an easy example. Now go from here to there, and what changed out there? That's now changing our star here to behave strangely and affect our planet. See, now so you can't. The emperor has no more, like, not even clothes, but just. They're talking about the full awareness and the full human domain of being aware of what you're seeing, to control that, because now whatever was set up as an excuse that was coming, it's run away past, like it's gone so far to the Uber above what was like in people's mind, this whole thing, how the world would have come, of temperatures had risen, all the things they gave you, like, oh, look at the crashing waves on this shoreline, we haven't come anywhere close to that. Oh, man, I don't know. I'm wondering if the frequency changes, and the reason that all this AI needs to be pushed out right now is because our star, our sun, is showing now glimpses into solar cycle 26, which is way early. So perhaps there's some combination with changes in the outer solar system. I mean, this grand solar minimum, this reduction in, 400-year low in solar activity was predicted for this solar cycle 25, but it didn't happen. But it appears that this for sure is going to be much lower than this solar cycle, just based on these solar polar field maps here from like cycle 23, 24, now through 25 is almost finished, You got to wonder with the frequencies, the changing of all of the planets in our solar system are experiencing changes right now. That's the crazy thing. And I'll let you respond, Ransom. And I will, let me for, the last, 20 minutes, read the changes. Somebody did a great job. They put each planet and they showed all the changes that are occurring on the planet. Not the Earth, but like Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Mars and Mercury and Venus. They're all changing, all of them. Cloud brightness, temperatures, atmospheric rotation, aurora positioning, everything, all changing. But I'll come back to that. I'll read it out for you. This is the most amazing thing. But, man, please, I was going somewhere with the thought, and I was trying to get to the graphics. But, man, take it over. I'm lost in thought.
Well, I'm pretty sure that all of this kind of adds up to what we've talked about before. They kind of are showing the generations alive right now, the technology and the direction that they plan on going. And if you really think about it, I mean, when you add fertility rates, people that are not fertile in the Western world, the amount of children that they're just having or not having by choice. And then you look at stuff like this. And I'm not going to say why, because I'm sure they have their own reasons why, but a study shows that Gen X and millennials are facing higher risks of cancers. But it's not just any cancers, it's the really good ones, like gastric cancer and pancreatic and stuff like that. Well, this is just the their own study. This is from The Hill. This is mainstream. So we have generations of people that are now, having all kinds of reasons to not make it into the future. And when you combine all of this into, just a little while in the future, you can see all kinds of scenarios that the governments or whatever is left after, worldwide wars, whatever structure it has, will have the power of doling out who has the right to have children, because they're going to be the ones offering the help to be able to have it. And they have the answers already. They've already showed us. They have factories that they can set up. They have the ability to create it and design it from scratch. But they'll be offering this technology. Who's going to be the new boomers? It's going to be Gen X and millennials here in a couple of decades. And they are already showing massive health problems at an earlier time than the generation before them. So what does that mean as a whole? Well, to me, that's just one in many, many factors that shows that there's a great die-off happening. Now, if you're saying that there are actual physical changes to the reality as far as the planets, the sun, and where we live, and you add that all into the same time, it looks like there's a big master plan of depopulation and then recreating after the reset. The big question is what is the trigger that sets off the actual worldwide reset that they're all planning for, that they're all giddy to get going? Is it a war by itself? Is it the massive famine that follows? Is it a great die-off of younger generations that, by the way, are getting increasingly, more options to help facilitate their demise, from street drugs to legal drugs to just governments around the world offering an easy way out with low financing and financial assistance if you're not the richer type?
Well, I'm gonna say no. I mean, yeah and no. The squaring of the planets in October of 2024 would be one of these triggers if you're looking for exactly what I'm looking for. Forget the politics, forget everything else. We're only talking about planetary geometry or planetary orbits, and the way that this particular set of planets called the gas giants, the largest planets in our solar system, that's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. They're all going to make a square. These four of them are going to make a square. Now, this configuration is in itself unusual, but the last time that this preciseness, it's 1 degree off of arc. So when you're going around 360 degrees, Jupiter's 1 degree off arc of what it was on the last time was 79 AD. Put that in perspective. So if it's going to be something of that large of a magnitude to shift the world, that the world needs to shift, and it must shift, and we're being shifted this fast, then it must be something of that magnitude. Like, this only happens once every 2,000 years, and it's here in a couple more months, October of 2024, at the end of October. So you would already start to see, if we're coming into the second electromagnetic field, and the Earth's going to run between the sun and then this once in a 2,000 year squaring of the four gas giants, could they not create their own electromagnetic field or a magnetic field? And what if just the gravitational tug, what's that going to do? It's the positioning of them. It's just the way, I'm going to call it angularity, would work. And as we come through, those different elements one by one would have a certain effect, but combined would have an exponential effect. Another thing to maybe look for would be higher tides coming in and out in, let's say, the middle of October. If you start to hear, or in October, if you hear a lot about tides, like high tides, boats being broken, harbors flooded, things washed over, a huge amount of damage at the ports, or any kind of fishing villages, holiday villages, these sort of thing on the seaside. These kind of stories you're going to want to look for, because it would be expected also, even with a very, very small change, a little bit of gravitational pull. Imagine if it was just even the equivalent of all those planets lining up. It didn't do anything electromagnetically. It only did something gravitationally, like the effect of the moon. Like, what if it just had another half of a moon effect, or even just another moon's effect by those planets and their fields out there, just the way, like I say, the angularity tugged on us. Well, what would that do with our tides if we had the gravitational effect of 2 moons versus 1? And you start to you got to think of a toroid loop as well. And, you look at magnetic fields and how they behave. So we're going to go through the middle of 2 of those for a minute. I'm wondering, as we're coming up too, these are the 4 planets I wanted to start with because the most change will be seen on these planets. So if you're looking for signs in the skies also, don't look right here on Earth or Mars or these really close-in planets to the sun. You want to look further out to specifically these 4 gas giants, because as you look at these, and if more incredible events happen on these 4 planets, it means they're getting more energized. And because they're getting more energized, that means they're interacting with that electromagnetic field. And the 4 of these creating that square has some sort of transducence loop in on it that then creates its own second field. And within the sun, it's the lesser field, so some transference occurs. And the Earth spins through that transference just for a minute, however long it lasts, in October. So when you start to see these planets charging up and you see, I guarantee in just a few more months, they're going to talk about, wow, look how big the auroras are on Jupiter. And they're going to, well, it's just more electrified atmosphere. More electrified atmosphere because those, magnetic field lines back to the sun are more electrified. So then that's interacting with the gases higher in the atmosphere. And then you start to see these larger than normal halos from the distance off the planet. All right, so let's talk about Neptune here. 2015, a dark spot just started in the atmosphere. Like Jupiter always has that dark dot that moved around forever. Well, Neptune just formed one. It was never there, and then 2015 they find it, and then it moved down to the equator, and they call it the equatorial storm, which is that dot. Then there's another dot that started, another second one of these, and then also and I also remember part of the upper atmosphere, let's say 60 degrees north and up to the Neptune's North Pole reversed itself. And then they had an anomalous temperature spike, but it doesn't really give the readings here. They have their report listed. It was DOI hypercolon, what's that, 10.3872 PJS ACSAA4. Now that would be for that report there. Each one of them has its own set of reports that you can find on Link Springer or anywhere like that. Let's see. Uranus, bright cloud features began, and this is where there's more electricity going into the system or a higher current flow, because the higher it is, it's like your light bulb. You turn it up or down. If you turn it up, it glows more, it's faster. And so then you get glowing clouds. That means there's some sort of magnetic field going down there, and it established an electric connection there, for a better term. Like you see that here on the Earth in the middle of cyclones and things. That hole around that's a magnetic field line that's going through there, and it's following along as these things get charged up by the interconnections between the sun and the Earth. And you'll see, space weather directly affects the intensity and building of typhoons, hurricanes, tornadic vortex winds, etc. They had a stratospheric vortex event in 2011 up on Uranus. Cloud pattern significantly greater than in previous years. That was 214. Like you can see it each year. So the first detectable difference, because the clouds got super bright in Uranus, was back in 1999, and then they really saw it in 2004. And then suddenly 2011, continues, seems like something's changing, brighter out there, stratospheric vortex. And then 2014, fast forward a little bit, cloud patterns significantly greater than in previous years. And then, this is another event here, intensification of the northern polar cyclone. That's 2022. See, that requires more juice into the system, for the easiest way to say it. And Neptune, again, really a lot of observations from 2015 to 2020, and things continue to get more noticeable in the outer planets. So if we look at Jupiter, that's a close one in. There's a lot, we got satellites up there, and Saturn. But this is the first one that was really, really, really observed, if you believe NASA, and if you believe all, because I'm going to get a bunch of people going, Earth is flat too. And I'm like, all right, I get it. I'll look at everything, man. But I just don't see things like Nibiru. I just don't see it coming back. You know, I mean, maybe I'm scratching my head, but if a brown dwarf, speaking of, that's the reason a brown dwarf and this Nibiru or wormwood is supposed to be an unignited brown dwarf like Jupiter, right? Like if something like that big was in the solar system, it would have perturbed the orbits, or I mean, the orbits would be spinning in the wrong place because the just the push of that thing's magnetic field would just make the planet move to a different orbit position. You would definitely see, even people with like backyard telescopes would see this in an enormous, nothing's in the right place. It should be in the sky right now. Wait a minute, we got a problem. So that'd be like millions and millions and millions of people seeing this. Because even if you look up at the night and you say like, where'd that planet? There was supposed to be one there. I don't know where to go to. So anyway, Jupiter, it is a brown dwarf unignited star here that we have in our solar system as well. That comes on and kind of, you know, fills in that most stars are bipolar stars. They have two of them. Usually two stars are formed at once, not one. Having one star by itself is it's not the norm, let's say. But it's not rare, but it's not the norm. It's just they're more frequently with a companion star. So really start to take a look, 1992, and then 2005 and 6, Jupiter storm, since the black and white photos that you remember as a kid, you saw in the textbooks, it formed a second then red spot. And then wind speeds increased by 8% on the planet, which caused more atmospheric abnormal heating. And then the red spots start moving around the planet, is just growing out of the atmosphere, anomalous lightnings. And as those red spots would come, and that was just because of the atmosphere, but then once the atmospheric disturbance stopped, those red spots would disappear. So as they're coming in and out of view, the red dots or the atmospheric disturbance comes out as a red dot on Jupiter. Anomalous lighting in the upper atmosphere. And then we saw those magnificent, unbelievably gigantic, visible from Earth, aurora coming off that thing. What's that, 4 years ago? And then Jupiter's magnetic field went strange changes, and it hadn't changed that much since the 1980s, when now they had a blue spot, hurricanes appearing in the South Pole, which was never seen before. And then there was a stratospheric jet with wind speeds above 500 miles an hour. Like things are speeding up on Jupiter in terms of cloud patterns and cloud speeds. You got to think about how would that, your clouds have sped up from 150 miles an hour to 515 miles an hour. Okay, what would that do? You got to ask yourself. So if you're looking at, let's see, okay, last one, Saturn. I know I'm boring people here with the astronomy lesson, but I'm trying to show the pattern here. So they started to observe lightning storms, which had never been observed before. In like 2004 and 6 was the first time they'd seen lightning storms. But damn, how long have we been looking at Saturn? Like that's something real simple. Like how long have we been looking at Jupiter and Saturn, and they see these things that had never happened before just like start to happen in a trend. It continues to change and amplify that they've noticed. It doesn't revert back to its old calmness. It's continuing to evolve in more something into the system. The entire solar system is being affected, and it's from the sun. It has to be. That's the only source. Where do you think the magnetic fields are coming from? Jupiter in itself has its own weak one because it never was an ignited star. So the story goes, but if you look at Thunderbolt's project, they talk about going back in prehistory where Saturn glowed as bright. It was the second sun in the sky. So, I mean, through history, things change. But at least in this iteration here, that we had all those black and white photos. They've been seeing this thing since the 1800s. And then in 2004, they start to see lightning for the first time on Saturn. And then they got the hot point, which again was that really, really bright glow through at the South Pole. It looked like somebody had a flashlight from the inside of the planet with that big, huge, bright white light coming out of it. And then they had different cyclones up there in the different chains. Obviously they named the rings up there. So the cyclones were bound into 23 and 26. New types of storms, new convection. Now you see, new convective storms for the first time near the polar latitudes. Now, remember that convective storms, right? Where else did we hear convective storms? Let me come back here. Jupiter also. Stratospheric jets. Anomalous lightning. So if it's happening on 2 of those planets out here, what do you think would be happening with our planet? We're way closer to the sun, right? So if Saturn's experiencing convective storm activity like we are here on Earth, with these tornadic, where these fronts come through just like electric fronts and super winds, and this explains a lot of what's happening. I don't know, Ransom, and I'm going to leave it there because these changes are happening everywhere throughout our solar system. So when, as an elite or a group of people with advanced knowledge and had a plan for when this time occurred, when would they put it into action? Like, I want to know, what's the marker in time where all the elite run off in a single day, and all the government officials, the continuity government, everybody leaves in a single day to go to their secure locations for continuity or whatever, continuity of corporation. They have safe places for the CEOs or whatnot, I guess. Everybody gets out in the same day for the same reason, and everybody just goes under. Like, all right, now we're going to ride out whatever is forecast to come rolling in on a natural cycle on the top of this planet. So at what point do they put an action plan in play? Like, is there enough already evidence that we're not past the tipping point? We're just going to move through this more electrified state within our solar system here in a decreased magnetic field. You can oscillate current and see what it does. Higher current, lower current. How would it affect our world? Well, perhaps the excuses we are given for the changes we're seeing are actually electromagnetic in effect, and the sun is causing all these changes, but you were sold a story because you can't really do much about the sun's magnetic field changing. But you can pick up a plastic straw and save a turtle. You know what I mean? Why don't you swap out your old Edison light bulb in for a new LED light? You get a solar panel. I got 2. What do you think, Ransom? Am I rambling? I think I am, but changes are here. Now, give me your timeline. What do you think would make them actuate is more my question, I guess.
I don't know. When you're talking about all that, and all I can think about is ancient peoples and what they thought about things versus how the elite view things now, right? And so what you're talking about out there is a literal square in space. So I wouldn't put it past elite people to think this is something significant. And just for example, like in masonry, you have
the Saturn cube. Sorry, you just sparked that.
Right.
That square in space is their Saturn cube.
Right. So they have that. And then you got in the Masonic tradition, a perfect square with corners is when you're building a critical foundation for something, right? You have to be square. You have to be all of the things. It ensures the buildings do not lean, right? They're structurally sound. They're strong. This symbol is used to teach lessons of morality too, like a foundation of your life. So that's just one version of it. But then you got the Saturn worshipers, right? And this means all kinds of different things to different groups. Like some people think it's a testing phase of life that occurs every 14 and 3/4 years, right? So all these multiples of 7 and 8, depending on how they're keeping track of it. And then you have in the ancient world, right? Which this is what I find really funny, is that the Saturn's transit, right, is worshipped by certain groups, and it means certain things like restrictions, limitations, delays, conflict, crisis, causing stress, fear, impatientness, frustration and self-doubt and all these other things on a personal level. But then you think about it like in the older Roman terms, and you got this whole idea of dissolution, abundance, wealth, agriculture, and periodic renewal and liberation, right? So that's a weird add-on to that. But it goes on, right? Think about the ancient symbol for Saturn. That would be like an ancient scythe or a sickle. And they represented that a lot with God, seeding or sowing time, right? So in any aspect, and there's a lot more deeper things, obviously, that go along with square. There's the square of space where you're in right now, and it intersects with all these other esoteric things. So, needless to say, simply all of the elite or people that are into the occult and esoteric stuff, this would be a very important turn of events, representing rebirth, reset, renewal, the beginning of a new age, exactly what we're talking about, a civilization cycle. And even on the masonry end, right? That's the foundational
Reset.
square. It's the reset, the beginning. And that's what we've been talking about over and over and over again, is that is the phase in civilization that we're at right now. As a matter of fact, just mathematically, as empires go, most of the empires on Earth right now are doomed for failure, just in comparison to other empires of the past. So we know we're there. And then we see all these signs technologically, governmental, morally, spiritually, and then the physical movements of the planet. You can see it's in high drive, realigning itself. So all of that stuff that you were saying would interact with this idea of a grand master plan to reset, start over. And it just fits perfectly. And not to mention, and I know we talked about this a long, long, long time ago when you were first talking about it. You have the flower of life, right? And the Jewish version of that, which almost looks exactly like the planetary lineup. Hello. Oh, well, I'll keep going. It does look like that
Yeah,
symbol.
something blinked out there. Ransom.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
something blinked out, like my internet stopped right when you were talking about that point. That was just strange right then.
Oh, well, I was just talking about a long time ago. We had talked about this before. I forgot the name of the Jewish symbol there, but it's got all the planet
Oh, the Kabbalah.
representation. Right, the Kabbalah. And not exactly, but almost the planetary lineup is like that right now. It's the same shape. So my point is that all of these different people from around the world, and you could take that one for an example, that culture is trying to go through fundamental change right now. And, you got to ask yourself what's on the other end of that. And if you just take that one thing, for example, they have a new map in mind, and they're not the only group that is planning to make new maps out of the world. The question is where do we fall when the new lines are drawn? Like, where do we live? Do we live in the socialist, communist, Marxist bloc? Or do we live in the more freer half of it? Or are they going to do away with that two-party dual system of thing and go for the gusto and have the one world order that they've always kind of dreamed of, wanted? And I think that's what this is. This is the sum of all fears, so to speak.
Well, I'm going to take a different timeline then, because that's the timeline, that projection that where we sit right now and we are analyzing. But what if you jumped onto a different timeline? You're talking about different events occurring. Well, what would take us on a different timeline, that all of that happening, where maybe just stop thinking that it exists, and suddenly you're jumped into a different timeline without that particular thing even in it, because you either don't believe it or it is fictitious, or something like this. I mean, we were talking about jumping timelines the other day, but something that seemed that it was before isn't now. I'm curious how our minds move us through all of these things, of these events and worlds, and if they're malleable by the person, collection of persons' thoughts that actually changes those events and the outcomes in the events, so that experience is not having by the conscious thought of people directing and steering through thought, those events not happening, not occurring, by steering them away and replacing them with other different thoughts of positivity and whatever that substitute would be for working together and spinning off in a different direction of And how those two worlds in your mind, literally would connect or dissect. And again, different timeline. So I don't know. But Ransom, I wanted to say one last solution here for us. And everybody, thank you tonight for listening. I want to present one last solution here. The more vegetables that are easy to grow for beginners that are right now for your autumn garden. If you like this content, consider buy me a coffee /civilization cycle. But I said, please buy us a double espresso so we can keep working and chugging out content and bringing you more stuff just like this. So buy us a double espresso, but it really is buy me a coffee /civilization cycle. But Ransom and I, we're chugging on the double espressos all the time. We're talking like this in the middle of the afternoon. We're always going like this. Ooh, super fast. What's the next thing? Okay, line up the docs. Let's go talk. Double espresso. So back to the fresca. I can't grow coffee here in my zone. I'm 7A. Coffee doesn't grow here. Sorry, or other grows coffee and grow my own, but I can't here. So arugula is another one. So people were saw one of the comments there. Thank you. Said what lettuce? Okay, so arugula lettuce would be a good one. Any kind of the butternut, butter squash, those kind of very supple green leaf lettuces, and then also different varieties of spinach if you like that. I found like oak leaf spinach that works really well. And something underground too you might want to think about: beets, carrots, and radishes. These three all are great for autumn gardens. And I know from a fact, like the carrots, we can eat those, and then we give the green that we didn't stir fry or do something with to the chicken. They love it. And the beets also. The beet leaves as they're growing, those green leaves, if you get the real soft ones, you can stir fry those and always have a meal of green leaf while the beets are growing. But the older leaves and thing, when you're not going to eat them and you're doing some garden work, all kind of birds love that stuff. Ducks, chickens, geese, they'll all eat it. Same with the radish greens, So anyway, Ransom, please wind us out. But everybody tonight, yes, we are rebranded and taking on the new name Civilization Cycle. So please share. And I don't know, man. It's going to be a wild week. So everybody, thanks for listening. And I said, Ransom's going to take us out.
Well, I was just thinking, you could add to those lists if you're growing some stuff inside, like the broccolis and cauliflowers and stuff. That all kind of last all the way to right before freezing. I mean, even when it's quite cold. I actually have a broccoli outside from more than a year ago, and it survived all winter. So if you live anywhere in the South, right, there's still almost a whole another growing season right now. So it's not too late. You just kind of change up what you're growing. But there's plenty of time for even summer squash still for quite some time. And then you plant some of winter squash and all of that stuff. You can be pulling in pounds and pounds of food still before winter rolls around. That's at least I'm about to start my second season of trying to grow stuff. It'll really be my first season this year, because I had to clean up a lot of debris from last year and get everything reset. And that's how, not only civilization, but your gardening is basically that way, right? You build it up, and then eventually you have to tear it down and reset everything. So it's growing good again. Unless you're doing the wild rotational farming, where you can plant some stuff in one spot and the next year plant something else there and move it around a little bit. Plus, it migrates on its own if you allow it to kind of take nature's course and spread around and seed everywhere. It kind of just migrates to the right place that it likes to grow. So there's plenty of stuff to still grow. And, a good idea probably this winter would be to buy meats while they're cheap. I mean, not cheap, cheaper than they may be in the near future. I'll put it that way. But anyway, that's all I got for Civilization Cycle till next week. If we don't, turn over that cycle here in the next couple days from some random event that they're planning for us to absorb and fear out about.
Never fear. Prepper All Naturals is here. Yeah, thank you tonight for Prepper All Naturals sponsoring the show here. You can go to adapt2030beef.com. They have freeze-dried steaks, prep with steaks, not beef crumbles, steaks, freeze-dried steaks. So think about what a game changer that is, 10 years shelf life, something very different. You know, I've seen a lot of, I've been looking for proteins. I've been trying to stack a lot of different protein powders, like those whey drinks and things bodybuilders use and whatnot. But you just can't cook that into a meal like that. I mean, a vanilla milkshake or a mango milkshake, whatever it is what it is. So it's hard to substitute beef. And, you know, they're trying to do a serious amount of reduction in cattle and chicken and hogs also. If you notice the same thing, like everything is focused on food to reduce the amount of food, to drive up the prices, to cause more of these same things to spin faster in the economy. So until next week, thanks for listening. Remember to sign up for the show notes. We will see you next week. Bye for now. DuByne, Ransom